You have a reading, you're breaking it up, you're chunking it for the students so it's not too overwhelming. They have a little graphic organizer where they can not just take notes, but they can jot down questions, they can write down words they don't understand. You could even have them draw pictures for your visual learners of things that they think are happening in that. And then while y'all were having your discussions, I was walking around to make sure that every group was on topic and was on task. And sure, in a big classroom, it's impossible to make sure everyone's on task, but if you walk around and you monitor, it becomes easier to make sure that they are having those conversations, that they are on task, on topic. So it still requires that element of teacher-led, like y'all said. I gave you the instructions, I gave you the materials, I monitored, but y'all were talking to each other and using terminology from the reading and things like that. So this is a strategy that you could use for student discourse in your class, even over something as seemingly mundane as a reading. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a comment.
Sure.
I thought the same thing when I was reading that conversation. I told Sarah, I said, I see this all the time in the classroom when the teachers think that they're doing the right thing and they're engaged. And I said, I pointed out from the author, he put the students or the others listen or ignore the class. Like, you have no idea. If they're just staring at you, that doesn't mean they're engaged. And so I mentioned to her it would have been better to put them in groups of 2 or 3. And let them discuss the process of the
Right, exactly, and that's a great observation. And yeah, you might have, like, again, out of a class of 25, maybe 1 student's answering the question, maybe you have 5 more who are actively listening to the answer, but you don't know how many you have sitting there that are like, oh, this isn't my question, so I can just tune out, and then they're not getting anything from that, so yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go through this process for the final 2 sections as well, where you're reading, jotting down questions, aha moments, and then we'll discuss with our partners. So just read and jot down your aha moments or questions in that graphic organizer for now. Yes, when you're done, please feel free to discuss with your partners and share your ideas, jot down any that maybe you didn't have that they enlightened you on, and then we'll come together as a group.
For building the foundation,
But instead of telling does not necessarily equate to learning.
That was something that really stood out to me too, because so often we think,
I wrote it.
Yeah, yeah, that was, as soon as I read that, it was like,
Bam.
bam. Yeah, because
I
it's exactly.
basically said, I was about to say the same thing.
what were y'all, what's
So, yeah.
about you?
That's what I was like.
So questioning the student is not the only tool to check for understanding, it's really their dialogue then. It's them, receiving information and learning.
Right. I think it's really rewarding too. I know I incorporate student discussion and debate a lot of times into my AP classes, and when you hear them come to those conclusions themselves and go deeper than maybe you even ever intended to teach them in that lesson, you're like, oh, like it's one of those proud teacher moments, because you're like, oh wow, they really get this and they get the depth of it. So. Okay, did anyone want to share as a group your aha moments, things that stood out to you, or any questions that you had over these last two sections?
We had a big aha moment, in the building the foundations. There was a sentence, I think, that a lot of teachers could benefit reading, where it says telling does not necessarily equate to learning. I think that's very powerful.
Definitely. I think so often as teachers, we want to be able to say, well, I said that in my classroom, why don't they remember it, or why don't they get it? And, some students might make sense to, like, they're a math brain, or a science brain, or a social studies brain, they're like, oh yeah, totally, I get that. But some of them are just sitting there like, okay, you said that, but I don't understand how they're connected, I don't understand that. Yeah.
As a teacher, I noticed I did that a lot, like in planning, I would go, well, let's just lecture because we want them to get the right stuff. When there's other ways to do it. There's other ways to give them they can read. But they need to get through this fast and we know it, so let's just bam it out. And are they learning? I don't know.
I think that's especially something when I was teaching AP, that's sometimes the philosophy that I know that I took, because there's so much you have to cram in, so much depth, and you like to think that, oh, these are higher level students, so they will get it. But you have to remember that even with those AP kids, you still have some that are struggling to stay in the class, like they want to be there, they're putting in the effort, but they need a little bit more time to process, and telling does not necessarily mean learning. So this isn't just your regular level students that might be struggling academically, it's really all of your levels, definitely. What about over here? Anything that stood out to you?
I think something that stood out to us was that questioning is not the only way to, find out if they're checking for understanding and finding out if they're really understanding the material and taking it to that depth that you want them to take it to. There's other ways of them engaging student to student and that type of thing that you can check for understanding that way as well.
Definitely, and I think that some students, not necessarily all students, but some students in some classes really love to discuss and will have productive debates. Every so often you get a class that's really good at that. And they have more fun with it when they get to kind of have ownership of their own lesson. They kind of get to steer their conversation where they want it as long as they're on topic. And I think they like that freedom, and they like the feeling of autonomy and the trust the teacher has in them to kind of direct their own learning. And it makes them, I think, a little bit more interested in the topic than just, oh, we're copying down lecture notes again today or something like that.
I also wrote down more processing time. We see a lot in teachers' classrooms, there's that silence and they get nervous that their kids are gonna get off task, so they just go. And the kids never get to that processing finality. So more processing. It's okay if your class is quiet for 30 seconds or a minute, the kids are processing. And they need that, but a good teacher would be like, no one's talking, we're not learning, let's go, and they're not ready for that. So when you said more